In this video, I am going to show you how to perform all the CRUD operations in ASP.NET Core MVC using the latest .NET version, .NET 9. CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update and Delete, and these are the basic operations included in every application. We will perform these operations on our data in this project and show the changes in the front end. We have already created a simple model and stored it in the database using the Entity Framework Core's code-first approach, and you can find the video in the card on the screen or in the description below if you want to know how that works. Well, welcome to Code the Future, my name is Ireland and I help you learn C# and .NET on your own. Now let's get started. This is the MVC project. We have only one model. We created a context and we stored these changes to the database. Now, one more thing I'm going to do before we start is that I'm going to add another property to our model just because it's a little too short, but we'll still keep it short so that you understand everything better, so that it is the most simple thing ever. So I'm just going to add another property, a double property named price for our item. We have already created migration and stored it in the database for our project. Now that we made a change to the model, we're going to need to add the migrations one more time to our database. For this reason, we just need to go to Package Manager console and click Add Migration and put a name here for the migration. Let's say second migration. Hit Enter, and basically this migration class that represents our database schema should be created, that should be displayed in the screen, and of course added in our migrations folder. So we'll just wait for the build to succeed. And this is the migration that we already created. So a new column was added to our database, to our table in the database for the price. And now just need to click on to write the command update database perform these changes to our database as well. Build succeeded. So now we just need to go to our items controller, and this is where all of the actions that will perform the needed operations will be stored. I'm just going to delete these two actions we had created previously. And first of all, what we're going to need is, for us to access the database, we're going to need to import the context in our controller. Firstly, I'm just going to need a private read-only variable to basically store the context, and we'll use this variable to do all sorts of methods that we can use from our context. But right now, just let's create this variable. I'll name it with the name of the context here. So this variable will hold our context. I'll just name it underline context, just as a practice. And inside the constructor for our controller, here we'll take basically the context by writing the context here and a variable to represent it. And then in the private variable that we declared above, we are just going to need to add the value of the context to our context variable that we'll use in the controller right here. Add a new line here. After storing the context in this variable, now we'll start with writing each of the actions. The first action, it's going to be a public iActionResult. I'll name it index for the main page, which will basically just display all of the items that we'll take from the database. And here we're going to return a view, but we need to return a view with the items that we'll take using the context from the database. For this reason, I'm just going to take a variable, call it item, and I'm going to access this from the database by using the underline context variable dot items to access the instance of the item created in our database, in our context that we have here. And then we need to write a method to list all of these items, just like this. But in such a case, when we query data from the database, it's recommended, and it's always what we do, is that we make the action method, to be asynchronous. An asynchronous action method basically allows us to await some data from the database, which means that the method will stop until we take all of the necessary data that we need, and then continues where we left off. For this reason, to write an asynchronous action method, we need the async keyword here on the method, and then this method needs to return a task of action results. And we need as well to write the await keyword in front of the part where we query the data from the database. And in a case like this, we need to use as well the toList async method, which lists these items asynchronously. We need to import entity framework core in order that it recognizes the toList async method. Entity framework core. Now we do not get an error here, so basically what we did here, our asynchronous action method allows us to wait until this task is fully performed, and then it continues to return the view, and the view should contain all of the data that we take here from the database. Now, after writing the index action method, we need to create the view page. To create a view page, let's just go to the items folder, which is the name of the controller. And here I'm gonna create a new view page with the name of the action, index.cshtml. Let's remove this part here. Now, in this view page, we use Razor syntax to basically embed the C# code in our views as well. And on top of the page, because in this page, we're going to display a list of the item models, we need to use the add directive in order to import a list of these models. To access them, I'm just going to need to write the name of the application, .models, the name of the model. We could also just import this directory on top of the page, but just to write everything in one single line. That's why I'm using it this way. And in this code block here, we usually specify the title of our page, the title of our tab. Basically, we do this with a view data, which is a dictionary in C#. This works with key value pairs, and we can set the value of the title by just writing view data title here as the key, and then we input the value in form of a string, let's say index here for the index view page. If you actually go to the layout page where we specify what will be displayed in the title of our page, you can see here that we can give a value to this view data, to this dictionary, with a key of title, and we automatically give it this text afterwards. We can remove it, we can leave it as it is, so that on top of the page we'll see, let's say, index-my-app, the name of the project. And this is how basically view data works. Now back to the index view page. Here we can give a header to our page, like an h3 header named index. And we usually use a table to represent a bunch of data. That's the example I'm using in this case. So like an HTML table element. With a class of table, and we'll separate it into sections. Table head for the head of our table. This is just some HTML syntax. And table body for the body of our table. In the table head, we can use this table row tags to write everything we want to be displayed in the first row, basically this table head, and we can use a table header here by writing th, and here we can input the name and the price of the table, the price of the item. If I just run the project, so that you see what we're doing at this moment. Just click with the right of the mouse here. In the view page you want to be displayed, and then click View in Browser. So here we have specified the table header, only the name and the price of the table, and then the data will come down below in the table body. So in the table body here we can use a for each loop. This will be a C# code, and the Razor pages allow us to use C# conditionals in it by just writing the @ sign and then the for each keyword. Here we'll take a variable and give it a name like item, but it doesn't matter the name of it in model. So this keyword is important. So in a variable we just create a temporary variable here, and we are looping through the model that we are inputting here on top of the page. And down below, inside a single table row, we will display by using the table data tags the name of each item by writing the @item, which is the name of the variable we specify here, dot name, and another table data for the item dot price. And so the price is basically formatted as it should be. We can use this toString method, and inside parentheses the n2. This is just a method that basically displays the price, which is a double with only 2 places after the comma. In the last table, in the last row here, I'm using another table data tag to have 2 links to redirect us to the edit and to the delete page that we'll create later on. So we'll see a table with a list of items, and by having 2 buttons there, 2 links, we'll then be redirected to an edit page for that item, or to a delete page to delete that item. These action methods that I'll redirect you right now will create later on, but just that we have it there. So I'm going to use these anchor tags to redirect us to an edit link, and inside this anchor tag I'm going to use an tag helper, an ASP action tag helper, and I'm giving it a value of edit. Now, what are tag helpers? Tag helpers are part of the Razor syntax, and they make it possible for us to do specific tasks. In this example, this tag helper will redirect the link to the edit action in our controller. That's the role of this tag helper. There are tag helpers for different things, but basically this is the good thing about the Razor syntax, that it allows us to connect our pages to our server-side code or to our controllers. I'm gonna actually use another tag helper to specify the ID of this edit page by using the ASP-route-ID at item.id. So we'll redirect us to the edit page for the specific, with the specific ID for that item. And now we get errors here because we have not created that action yet. Why did I remove it here? Edit. Okay, my mistake there. Here I'm going to use another tag helper, which works the same way, but just will redirect us to the delete page for that specific item. And this is all we'll display in our index page. I'm just going to comment this out for now because we'll get many errors. And just go back to the controller to proceed with the next action. Just as a reminder, if you want to improve your C# skills or have a high quality reference guide for everything C# related, I highly recommend getting my C# ebook, which is currently on sale. It's crucial to learn the fundamentals correctly, and whatever you are building in .NET, this book will be a valuable resource for you. Click the link in the description if you're interested, and let's get back to the video. Now, the next action we are going to create will be the action to create an item. Firstly, we just need to create a public iAction result with the name of create. And this will just return the view, the corresponding view that we're going to create right now. So just go to the items folder in our views folder and create a new Razor page. An empty Razor page here. I'll name it create. And just as we did in the last time, we need to import the model, not a list of models, but just the model. So the name of our application dot models dot item. And we'll set the title of our page with the view data dictionary here to be create. Let's just input a header saying like create an item. And now here what we're going to do, we're going to use a form to submit the data that we'll input in the form to another action that we're going to create, so that basically we store this new item that we'll create in our database with the help of Entity Framework Core. So I'm using a form first of all here, and I'm going to need to use a tag helper to connect this to an action in our controllers named create, and we need to specify here the method to be post. We are basically going to create a second create action in our controller, which will be of post type. What this means is that this action will be able to get only post requests. So get requests are those requests when the action returns just some data from the server or a web page, and the actions that accept post requests, they are actions that retrieve data from a form submission. And inside this form here, we're going to have some div tags for each of the properties that we'll take in this form. So let me just give a class to this div. This is just a Bootstrap class for some styling, which is named form group, which you can see in the Bootstrap documentation to make the form a bit better looking. And I'm going to set a label for the data that we'll input here. And we'll use this for attribute to connect it to the name of the item, basically. Here inside the label, I'll just name name, which is what will be displayed on the screen, the text. And underneath, we'll write an input tag, which will accept data of type text. We'll give the class of form control to make it a bit visually better. And with the ASP4 tag here, we'll connect this input to the name property of the item, so that when we input this data to our create action, this will know that this data is the name property of an item. And just like we are receiving the name in this div group here, I'll create a new one to have a label for the price here, and to also retrieve a number here in the input, and this will be connected to the price attribute. The last thing we need in the form is a button to submit the data, which will have the type submit. We'll give it a bootstrap class to look visually better. Button primary, which gives it this blue color, and just name this button submit. And this is how our form should look like. If I run the application and go to actually this page, the form is not yet optional because this page is not yet functional because we haven't created the second action method, but we'll just see how it looks like. Let me see what error I did here. Okay, line 4. Here, I just misplaced the semicolon. Let me run the app again and go to the create page /items/create. This is how our create page looks like. We can input a name here and the price for our item, and if we hit on submit, this data should be inputted to our action method, and then where we will specify how we will store this data as an item in our database. So let's just get back to the code and go to our controller. So here we'll specify a second create action, and since this action will take post requests, we need to specify on top of the page HTTP post. For get requests, for actions that receive get requests, this is not necessary to note there, to write there. So I'm gonna continue with the method, the action method here, which will also be an asynchronous method. So I'm gonna need to write the async keyword. This will return a task of action results. I'll name it create. And here I'm going to need to use an attribute called bind to bind this, what we'll receive in this action, basically the ID, the name, and the price of the data that we input in the form, and to bind it to the item model so that the method recognizes that these data are part of an item. Here we need to write an if clause to basically check if the model inputted in our form is correct. So we're going to use a model state that is valid method. So this method here of the model state class just verifies if the model inputted in our form is an actual item, basically. And if this is the case, we'll use the context that items that add methods. So this method that Entity Framework Course gives us, and add to the context this item. So basically the input from our form, we're adding it to the database in this line right here. We are using the await keyword here, and we'll just use the context one more time to save the changes done to the database by using the save changes async method. And after the changes are saved in the database, we just need to return the viewer to the index page. For this reason, we're going to use the redirect to action that will redirect the user to the index page. Just like we return the view, redirect to action basically is an other result type, just like view result. Redirect to action result is another result type that will redirect the user to the index page, as already mentioned with big I here. And if the model is not valid, we'll just return the user to the current view. So again, to the create page, and we'll input the item here. Let me just run the project and see how our create method, action method is working. If I put a name for an item, let's say microphone, that price it like $200 or something, just 200 since the price accepts a number, and click submit. Should be redirected to the index page, and here we see the name of the item and its price with 2 places after the comma. And basically I can just input a $sign there manually in the index page in the items folder. So just here, like a $sign. Have to reload the page here, and we should see the $sign after the price. Okay, now let's just go back to our controllers and write another action, which is going to be the edit action. In this case, we're still going to need 2 edit actions, one for the get request and one for the post request. Firstly, let's start with the action that accepts get requests. This is going to be an asynchronous action or action method, which will return a task of action result. I'll name it edit, and this action will actually receive an ID. Let's open up the curly braces again, and I'm going to use an item variable to loop through the database as a search for a specific item. So basically, when we are redirected to a page with the details of a specific item with a specific ID, we will look through the database to find that item and display it in the screen. So I'll use the await keyword here to await the result that we expect from the database. So underline context dot items that, and here we'll use the first or default async method that will search for a specific item in the database, where the ID of that item will be equal to the ID that we take here in the action parameters. And then I'm just going to return the view with that, and the view will contain that specific item. Let's just create now another view page for the edit page. I'll name it edit. And what's interesting is that the edit view page will be similar, close to identical with our create page, because it will receive a form that can be changed from the users. Let me just copy what we had from the create page here, put it in the edit view page. The only thing that we're gonna change here is the title of the page, which will be named edit. The header, I'll change it to be edit an item. And I'm going to redirect the users that submit the form to the edit action in our controller. The method is going to be a post method. And as you can see here, basically the user will be redirected to a form with already filled data, to a form to change the name of or the price of that specific item. And when a user changes the data here and submits the data of the form, the user will be redirected to the edit action, and we'll need to create the post action in our controller as well. So we need to write the HTTP post data annotation. This will be a public method. It will be asynchronous as well. It will return a task of action result. I'll name it edit. And this action method will receive an ID, which will be int, and also the data from the form. And we'll use this bind attribute here as well to bind the data that we'll receive, the ID, the name, and the price that we'll receive from the form to the specific item model. And again, we need to make this check if the model inputted is a valid model. We need to use the context here and update the database with that specific item. Then we need to use the await keyword here and save the changes to the database with the save changes async method, and then we'll redirect the user to the index page, and we'll use this redirect to action result, and we'll redirect the users to the index page. And if the model is not a correct model, basically we'll return the user to the page they already were together with, and we'll input this item to the page, so that when the user will land on the same place on the same edit page, the form will be already filled with the data. So let's just run the project here and test this in action. Let me check what I did, what kind of mistake I did there. I think I forgot to close the method here. The action method should be okay right now. Okay, let me just refresh the application, and I'm actually gonna go to our index page. The index page in the items folder. Then I'm gonna uncomment the edit anchor tag here. So I'm just gonna comment this anchor tag that deletes the items. So I'm just pressing Ctrl K plus C to comment this part. And we should have in the table, we should have basically a link to redirect us to an edit page for the item that we have already stored in our table. So let's just refresh the page here. Here we have the item's name, the price, and this edit anchor tag, which is basically links us to another page. The address of this link is items/edit/1, which is the ID of this actual item. And here, if I would change the name here, let's say, change it to just like Mike. I can change the price as well. If I hit on submit, we should be redirected to the home page, and the name is changed. The price is changed. So basically, when we submit the form, we call the HTTP post edit action method. Then we basically check if the data submitted is correct. We update the database with that item that is inputted there. We save the changes and we redirect the user to the index page. Now, last but not least, we'll need to create a couple of other action methods to delete the items. The first method will accept GET requests, and it will be a public and asynchronous method, which will return a task action result. I'll name it delete, and this will receive in the parameters here an int ID. I'm using a variable here. I'll name it item, and we'll look through the database for that item with that specific ID. So I'll use the await here to await the data from the database, and then underline context that items that this first or default async method to search for that specific item. The item's ID that we're looking for should be equal to the ID that we're taking here from the parameter. And let's just return the view with that specific item variable that we have here. Let's just go to our items folder inside our views directory here and create one last view page. I'll name it delete. In this view page, we need to import the item model as well. So by just writing the directory of the models and the name of the specific item of the specific model, we can specify the title of our page here with this view data. We'll name it like just delete. And let's just input a header here asking the user like, are you sure you want to delete this item? Question mark, question mark. And let's just input here in form of a few paragraphs the name of that item that we're receiving in this view page. We'll access the item by writing at and this model attribute that the view page has, dot name, and I'll use another paragraph to access the price of that model. Let's just write the $sign here as well. And if the user is sure he wants to delete the model, the item that is displayed on the screen, we need to write a form for the user to be able to delete it. So form, to write the ASP action tag helper that we have been using so far to redirect the user to a delete action method that we'll create, which we haven't done yet, which will be of type post. And here we're just going to need an input to take the ID of our model, and because it's not a good practice to basically display on the screen IDs, we just put this input to be of type hidden so that we won't see the input on the screen. And by using the ASP4 tag helper, we'll connect the value in this input with the ID property. And then another input we're going to need to be of type submit. This is just like a submit button, actually. We'll give it a class, a bootstrap class of button and button danger, which makes the button red. And the value, or what will be displayed in this button or in this input, will be delete. Now, when the user clicks on this input time and submits the form, he will be redirected to the delete post action method that we will create right now. Set the data annotation of the method to be HTTP post, and the method will be public. It will be an asynchronous method to return a task of iActionResult. And this method will be good to be named delete as well, but we cannot name it delete because we already have another delete method, which in this case will contains the same parameters. So when we have two action methods that have the same name and the same amount of parameters and the same name of parameters, we cannot have these methods with the same name. For this reason, I'm just going to name it delete confirmed. As a practice, this will receive an int ID parameter, and actually, because we specified in our delete page here in our form, we specified that the form will be submitted to a delete action. The practice, a common practice to be used in this case is that inside this data annotation here, you can write the action name delete. So whenever user sends a request to a delete action of type post, this method here will receive this request. Now I'm going to need a variable here to get our specific item from the database. I will await the results and we'll get the item from the context by writing context.items, and I'm going to use the find async method. Here we'll input the ID, so we're finding the item we need with this specific ID that we get from a parameter here. And here we need to write an if clause to check if the item is actually not null. So basically, if we can find this specific item with that ID in our database, we want to remove that item from the database using the remove method, which will take the item as an argument here. Next, we just need to save the changes to our database. And as you can see, all of these methods we are accessing by using the context. And then we need to return the user to the index page. So in this case, in this action method here, even when the item is null or not, the user will be redirected to the home page, to the index page. Let me run the project one last time to check all the functionalities of our application. And before I forget, I'm just going to go to the index view page to uncomment the anchor that will redirect us to the delete page. Just hit on Ctrl K plus U to undo the commenting here. The ID here is apparently with a lowercase letter. Let me run again the project. And let's just go to the /items/index page. Okay, here we have our only item here, the mic of a price with a price of $300. Just actually going to create a new one, /items/create. Let's say keyboard priced €100, $100. Hit on submit. We have our second item here. We already saw the edit option that works. If we click on submit, we'll be redirected to the index page. Let's try the delete, how it works. If I hit on delete here, we'll go to the route items/delete/1, which is the ID of this specific item. And we see here, are you sure you want to delete this item? We see the name of the item and we should have seen the price here, but apparently something is not right there. Okay, so we need to specify here the model.price. Let's just refresh the page. Okay, we see the mic, the name of the item, the price of the item. If I click on delete, we see that we do not have this item anymore in our index page. So basically we called the action method, the delete action method in our controller. Here we found that item in our database, we removed it, we saved the changes, and we redirected the user to the index page. If you found this video helpful, make sure to watch the following video, which should appear on the screen, to learn how to perform the CRUD operations when the models have a one-to-one relationship. Don't forget to like the video if you got value from it, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you in the next one then.